We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Valentin. Hey man, I want to share with you an opportunity to join an online event hosted by BraveCo. If you're hungry to experience community, breakthrough, and hope with like-minded men, I want you to join us at www.bravecochallenge.com. Now, let's get back to this week's episode. Well, I'm here with my good friend, Banning Liebscher. Banning is an incredible man. If you don't know Banning, Benny grew up in Reading and really cut your teeth there in ministry. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But then you built Jesus Culture. You founded Jesus Culture, which is an incredible ministry, and eventually moved from Reading to Sacramento, where you now have a really great church and ministry, as well as you're an author of several books. How many books have you written?
Well, I have more to my name, but one was like a devotional. So do we really count that?
No,
So
it does.
3.
It does.
I can't. Okay, well, then I have like 5 or 6 books, but let's say 3 solid books. And then I've got a couple other things thrown in there.
Well, I'm so thankful to have you on here. You're one of those guys that I respect so much. You've always been a guy that I've looked up to throughout the years. And so, yeah, I'm stoked to have you on here. Thanks for coming on, Banning.
Well, Jason, thanks for having me come on, and always love talking with you. Every time I'm with you, I think about the phone call I got when you called me to go cut wood. Like every time we connect. And for all those listening right now, this is like a little microcosm picture of the mind of Jason. He literally called me because he knew I had a wood stove and said, "Hey, do you want to go cut firewood?" You didn't even need firewood. You literally were just like, "I want to go cut firewood.
Bro,
Let's go cut firewood." And then you took me, I've never been to it. You took me into the forest in Trinity County. And we were looking not just for I didn't even know what madrone was. And we were just hunting for madrone. And then I'd never even used a chainsaw ever, but we were using chainsaws that were dull, that like didn't quite work. And this is every time I see you, this is the story I think of, is Jason calling me randomly going, "You want to go cut some wood?"
Bro, and you brought up Chris Kilala. Do you remember that?
Yes. I think Chris Kilala, who weighed all of 90 pounds, was a teenager. And it was up to that point was maybe the most manly thing I'd ever done with my life. Easily, actually, not just most. Yeah. I'll tell you right now, up to that point, that was I had never done anything as manly as what you took me on. So,
well, it's my pleasure. That I would like to. I mean, I'm about to say, well, that was my former life, but then part of me is like, man, I honestly love cutting firewood so much. It's one of my gripes about the house that I'm in today is I don't have a wood stove here. So I'm working hard to get it. It's like $6,000 though, you know?
Just so you can cut wood.
Just so I can cut wood, cut and burn wood.
Oh
I love cutting and burning wood.
That's the Weaverville coming out of you.
It is. Yeah, it's so satisfying. The last year I was in Weaverville, I cut and burned 14 cords of oak on my own. Oak and madrone. Yeah, and people will say, "No, that's impossible. You can't do it." I am not a liar. That is what I did. I love it. Yeah,
just therapeutic. Yeah. So if you listen, you can go to counseling, or you can go out in the woods and cut wood. Those are your 2 options.
Yeah. Well, no, those are good times. That was 20 years ago.
Probably. Yeah, it was a long time ago. Yeah, I bet.
It was. So Banning, tell us a little bit about where you grew up, and then we're going to talk a little bit about your book that you wrote. I'll introduce that in a little bit, but tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you came into ministry and kind of how you got your passion for what you're doing.
Yeah, well, listen, if you know Bethel at all, and if you know Reading at all, I am probably one of a handful of people that actually grew up in Reading. So I was born and raised in Reading, started attending church at Bethel before Bill was there. I started attending church when I was a senior in high school. And
Bro, before
just go
Bill, that's wild.
before Bill. There was a church
Gosh.
before Bill. So I was there, went to youth group, loved the pastor and the youth pastor, just got heavily involved. Then
Yeah.
when I came, I went to school for a year in college, and I came back to do an internship at my home church. And when I came back, the pastor had transitioned out, and so they didn't have a pastor for the first part of my internship. And then partway through my internship, they hired Bill. And so Bill, I was actually there on kind of on staff. Can you call an intern on staff? If you can, then I was on staff before Bill, and then so
Yeah.
I was an intern in the youth group. Bill came on, and then when my year internship was over, they hired me as the associate youth pastor. Then I was on staff in a total about 18 years at Bethel. And I felt a real call to ministry when I was 17. When I really encountered the Lord in high school, just felt a call to preach. I'd read a book by Billy Graham. I'd read a book on Billy Graham. Some itinerant speakers had come through Bethel, and that really kind of Sean Smith, Iverna Tompkins,
Yeah.
that really had impacted me. So I'm 19. I just want to go preach and travel. And but Bill asked me to be the youth pastor when I was 21, and I told him no. I said I don't feel called to the local church or young people. I just want to travel. I kid you not. I said I just want to travel and preach.
Oh
And
my
so I thought
goodness.
I was going to Colorado. I legitimately told him no. And then some doors that I thought were open kind of closed. And so I said, maybe I'll be youth pastor. So I went back. I said, is the job still on the table? And they said yes. And I said yes. And I was on staff for 16 years. I was a head guy for 12 years for youth group. And anyways, that's the story of that. So that's kind of how I got in, and how I've been doing ministry. And then senior pastoring wasn't even on my radar, as crazy as that is. And then, about 8 years ago, we moved down here and started a church.
How did you start Jesus Culture?
We God had started to move at Bethel in kind of 96 and 1996. And then in 1999, as a youth group, we decided to put on our first youth conference. We just put on a youth conference as a youth group, and we're just going to try to serve churches. We started doing two of those. We started doing two of those a year, and just kind of started growing from there. God was really showing up and impacting kids, teenagers, and then we just kind of started. We called the conference Jesus Culture. The conference was that we didn't actually have a. I mean, you remember Mike Morris from Weaverville, but we didn't actually.
Gosh, yeah.
He was a part of coming up with all this stuff, but we didn't. So we just started doing conferences, and then from there, we had a worship team. Kim and Chris. Were with us in youth group. And then I thought we should take this out. And then we started doing campus ministry. Then we started doing conferences in other cities. And then we recorded some albums. And it was like that. I'm not trying to say like it was.
No, for sure.
It was a little less strategic and more like, let's go do a conference in Atlanta.
Yeah.
What if we recorded an album?
Yeah.
That's and then it just started growing from there. So that's kind of how we started it. So many times I remember it's so funny, man. Guys want to put on seminars about how they got where they got and how to build what they built.
Yeah.
And I just want to go, come on, guys. Half the stuff we did, we fall in, we don't fall into it because the Lord's hand is on it. But it's just like, I don't know, I took this next step.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. And then I took the step after that. And there wasn't like a 15-year plan that we worked backwards on. We were just following Jesus with all of our heart. And just going after God, and then kind of started ended up in places. And so that's how we started.
We're going to dive into your book a little bit, but I mean, to me, it really is the way forward, because most of the stuff that we try to plan, that you actually sit out and go, okay, I'm going to build this giant movement. Like it never really works like that, because figuring out from point A to point Z is just so impossible. But it really is all about like, well, what's the next step you can take right now?
Yeah.
What's one thing you can do? Oh, we can go to Atlanta. Let's go to Atlanta. That would be awesome. And
Yeah.
do this conference and get some momentum and do all that stuff. Yeah, that's
I,
awesome.
I tell you, man, I think as the older I get, the more I realize, because I'm a vision guy. So to be clear, I love
You
when
are.
people have vision. I love that they're dreaming
Yep.
big. I love that you're dreaming big about BraveCo and have vision and want to go
Yep.
places. And I'm driven by that stuff. But I
Yep.
think the reality is the older I get, I'm less driven by vision and just more driven by obedience. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, Lord, what do
Wow.
you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And do this. Okay, then I'll go do this. And lots of times people are so frustrated around dreams aren't happening, visions aren't happening.
Yeah.
But the reality is, I just want to go, are you doing what God's asked of you? Is there
Yeah.
anything that you're not doing? This is what I want to
Yeah.
ask. Are you in disobedience?
Oof.
Has the Lord asked something of you that you're not doing? And
Gosh.
and and they may say, well, I don't know, I haven't checked. Okay, well, go check. But
I
in
don't want to
following the
check.
Lord, yeah, totally. Is there anywhere where you're being disobedient? And they
Yeah.
go, no. Then I'm like, then you're good, man. Then you're good. It's not about if my dream's happening, if my vision's happening. It's just
Yeah.
about am I being obedient? And I'm
Yeah.
like, then you're doing good,
Yeah.
then you're
It's so
doing good.
true.
So
And to me, like, okay, being obedient is one part of it. It's like if you know that you're not being disobedient, sometimes, okay, follow me. Like sometimes just because you're not being disobedient doesn't necessarily mean that you're being obedient though.
yeah, I would agree.
Because
I would agree.
there's like this middle ground of like, well, I'm not doing anything God isn't asking me to do. Uh, and at the same time, like, boy, I sure could do a lot more with like maybe I'm the parable of the talents guy that
Yeah.
I didn't bury it, but I also didn't multiply it a ton. I did some of what I could. And
Yeah.
but I want to dive in a little bit. I've been reading your book, The 3-Mile Walk, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Now,
Thanks,
full
man.
disclosure, I haven't finished it yet.
That's all
Um,
right. I'll give it
yeah,
to you all right now. I'll give it to you all right now.
no, I have it. Yeah, I have it.
No, I'm saying I'll just lay
Oh,
it all. I'll lay
you'll
out the whole
unpack
thing
it.
right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, uh, I want to dive into it. Um, and for those of you that are going to hear the podcast, I want to encourage you to read the full book. I'm going to go back and read through it as well myself. There's just so much in it and so much to unpack, but I really want to dive into it. It's Jonathan and his armor bearer is kind of the premise of a lot of the book.
Yep.
Um, and about it's really about finding your call in God and
Yeah.
not just finding it, but really stepping up to the plate and answering that call. And
Yeah.
can you, just for starters, can you kind of explain the story of Jonathan and his armor bearer? Because it's
Yeah.
this fantastic, it's definitely one of those Bible stories that you go, do people like that even exist still today? And
Yes.
like, how does that even happen? So just explain the
Yeah.
story a little bit and then we'll go from there.
Well, I'm gonna describe First Samuel 14 to you, but let me just say this. I have a real passion to see people alive. And I want to see people thriving. I
Yeah.
want to see people alive. I
Yeah.
want to see people fulfilled. I want to
Yeah.
see people satisfied. Now, I don't equate any of those things with safety
Right.
or ease or comfort. So I don't think that satisfied, thriving, fulfilled is connected to safety, comfort, convenience. But I want to see people alive. And so what I've realized
Hey,
is
before you go on, we should probably put an exclamation point on that, because I think that that's probably a key for men. I'm talking to men right now. That's
yeah,
probably a key for men that most men look over or bypass, right? Because this safe, comfortable, risk-free life is seems so appealing, but it is so detrimental to
boring.
your soul, and you die there, right? Guys, so many guys are feeling like my life sucks, what's wrong with my life, but they're trying to create this life that's so safe.
dude. So there was I think it's the greatest catch or the biggest catch. I forget that show out there.
Deadliest
It
catch.
was one of those, yeah, deadliest catch. It was one of these shows, and I heard this. I don't know where I heard this from. It may have been from you, but I remember the guy on there. They're out there filming, and they're asking this captain of this boat. Have you heard this? They're asking this captain. I may have heard this from your dad actually, but they just said, "Dude, is this safe? Is this even safe?" And the captain said something like, "My job's not to get you home safe. My job's to get you home rich."
Yeah.
And I just love that, you know. So it's not like, I think this
Yeah.
could have been Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe may have told this story. It's not like safety is not the number one. We think safety is the number one
Yeah.
priority.
Yeah.
And they're like, safety is not the number one priority. Getting
It's
you
not.
home rich is the number one priority. Is
That is
safety somewhere
awesome.
else on the list? And we just don't live like that. Yeah, you know. And listen, this isn't a knock on the boomers at all, but at all. But you come out of the World War II, you come out of that greatest generation type thing, and you
Yeah.
come home, and what begins to get solidified is this: make sure you have a retirement, make sure you
Yeah.
have health insurance, make sure you have a house that's paid off, make
Yep.
sure that you have, like, and it was all built around safety.
Safety,
So we were
predictability.
raised, everybody was raised around safety is the number one goal
Yep.
that you would, that you know, and you're right. It's just not, so anyways,
Keep
so I
going.
want to see people alive. So what I realized was this, was that the people that are most alive, the people that are most thriving, most fulfilled, are those that are fully engaged in the call of God on their life.
Yeah.
And that call is split into kind of two things. That every single one of us has a call to be someone. God is trying to shape us and form us into someone, ultimately to look like Jesus, but that
Yeah.
we're all called to be someone, but that we're also called to do something.
Okay.
So we're called to look like Jesus, but we're also
Yep.
called to partner with him, to put our hands to something in the earth when it comes to the plans and purposes of God. And
Yep.
so we have a call. That call is a call to be and a call to do. And that people that are most alive are not people that are safe, are people that are fully engaged in that thing. So
Yep.
that story for me in 1 Samuel 14 is such an incredible picture of what it takes to be fully engaged. Because in 1 Samuel 14, it's Jonathan and his armor bearer.
Yep.
And if you've read it all, it's Jonathan's armor bearer, and they're going up against the Philistines. But the story starts with Saul sitting under a pomegranate tree. And here's Saul, King Saul, sitting under a pomegranate tree. And the picture is he's sitting on one hill. There's a 3-mile valley, and then on the other hill is the Philistines. So Saul is content to, like, sit underneath his pomegranate tree, not engaged in the
Yeah.
mandate and the call that's on his life to defeat the Philistines. He's hanging out with the army. They're all good. But something stirred in the heart of Jonathan that just said, I'm not okay sitting, just sitting here while the enemies of God are 3 miles away, and I'm not content. I'm not satisfied. So he got up, grabbed one other guy, and said, "Let's go." And he started what we call the 3-mile walk. He started the journey to fully engage the call that God had on his life. And it's this picture of Saul, who was content to sit under a pomegranate tree and not really engage, every once in a while shout, but not
Yeah.
really engage. And then Jonathan just said, I'm going to get up. We got to do something. And I think that the Lord stirs. There's a restlessness inside of men,
Yeah.
I'd say inside of people. But
Yeah.
there's a
For sure.
restlessness inside of men that says, I need to be, like, engaged. And your work needs to be connected to that engagement. And like we need to be able to connect what we're doing to, I am stepping out and taking risks, but it is to engage the call of God on my life. And so that story is such an incredible kind of, for me, it's this really great preaching story
Yeah.
of what it is to see somebody content to sit under a pomegranate tree and somebody else that says, no, I have a holy dissatisfaction and I refuse to sit on the sideline. I'm going to engage the call of God on my life, and to move towards that. And then we could talk about it. We unpack kind of the three things in that, but yeah.
One of things that I always feel, I felt this about George Washington a long time ago. I remember driving down the road thinking, I just read the book 1776, which is a
Yeah.
phenomenal book.
Yeah.
And I used to think like, man, George Washington was so lucky because his battle was right there. Like he could see it. He had this
Yep.
battle that he could fight in. Here you have this picture of Jonathan, and the war was clearly in front of him. Like
Yes.
you have to disengage in order to not engage because it's right there, right? And I always felt like, oh man, guys are so lucky who are born into this wartime, such obvious
Yeah.
wartime, because they have this clear calling, not to realize what I later realized is that, oh, that thing that I wished that I would have been born into, I'm literally born into that. I'm
Yes.
in the battle. Like I have a
Yeah.
war right in front of me. And I think that so many men don't know how to find their calling or where to engage. I wrote down this quote from your book. I just wanted to read it really quick. It's easy to assume that when you're awakened to your call, that you'll grab the bull by the horns. I wrote the bull by the horns, and
Yeah.
run. But most people don't. A lot of men stall out, they give up, they don't engage. Can you tell me, why do we get this like Saul mentality where the battle's clearly in front of him? God's called him. He's a king. I mean, he could even be a warrior king if he really wanted to step into that call. Why do you think that so many men fail to step up?
I'm reading a book called The Warrior Ethos. I think it's by Stephen Mansfield. It's a little tiny book.
I mean, that just sounds like a good book.
Yeah. Well, it's about Spartans, how they raised
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
At some level, probably, we're raised in a generation that it isn't having to go to war, or
Yeah.
safety is the number one goal, or
Yeah.
work at a factory, or whatever else,
Yeah.
And so I imagine that's part of it.
Yeah.
Um, the breakdown of the family is probably
Yes.
part of it. Like there's not necessarily fathers that are walking with sons, and that, it's why we love sports so much. I mean, we vicariously are living through other
Yes.
people willing to sacrifice for something, willing to give their life for something, willing to engage, willing to play hurt. Like we're trying to do that through it's and like we're entertained by it, but it touches something in us.
Yep.
But or also I think what you recognize, what you just said, like you're born into a war. Here's the crazy thing for me. Let's forget what's happening in the world right now and
Yeah.
just say this. There is a real war called the war to be. I mean, here's the crazy part.
Yeah.
What I'm called to do is
Yeah.
easier than who I'm called to be. So I just think
Yeah.
we haven't necessarily put this stuff in context of, I come from a long line of sexual dysfunction. So my dad's an amazing man and we're very close, and
Yep.
he's done such a great job. But we come from a long line of broken, womanizing, sexually dysfunctional men. And
Yeah.
so part of my war
Right.
is I'm going to be who God's called me to be, so that my son
Right.
can fight another battle.
Yep.
And so, but we're not framing things sometimes, like, dude, you were born into war, man. You didn't get to choose the line of men you came from, but this is
No.
the line of men you came from. And now you get to go fight that thing, and you get to go fight to become someone. You get to
Yeah.
go fight to become the husband that you're called to be, the man that you're called to be. So I think and it's just, listen, it's not as satisfying. It's easier. It's so interesting. There's even guys. I remember there was a guy who was dealing with homosexuality and was really dealing with same-sex attraction and was just wrestling with that stuff. And he finally, this years ago, but he finally just said, I just am done fighting.
Yeah.
And I just am done fighting. And I remember Danny Silk saying, oh, you don't have a choice. There's a war either
Yeah.
direction.
Yep. It's
But
so true.
yeah, you don't, oh, you think that you're not going to have to fight anymore. But somewhere in our head, it's easier just to keep that unhealthy coping mechanism. It's easier
Yeah.
just to say, I just don't want to fight anymore.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to just go this direction. But we just don't realize, oh, you don't have a choice. There's a
Jordan
war.
Jordan Peterson would say you have to pick your sacrifice, right? Your suffering. You have to pick
Oh,
your
so good.
suffering
Yes.
because you're going to suffer one way or another. You're going to suffer under the weight of sitting under the pomegranate tree, disobeying God, right?
Yes. Yes.
Or, or you're going to suffer walking across that 3 mile, every step of that 3 mile walk. If you go back and read Jonathan's account, like he wasn't even sure that God was going to come through for him. All he
Yes.
knew is that he couldn't stay back there.
Yes.
And it's like burning the boats. I can't remember who it was, but we all
Yes.
hear that story of
Yes.
the army that sailed to the other country and they burned their boats and just went, we made the decision super easy for ourselves. There's no place left to go.
Yeah. We also don't live, we have this is us,
Yeah.
but we live in a very selfish society and a very entitled society.
Yeah.
So partly why you say, why is this war thing not there? At some level, it's because we've been discipled by a secular culture
Mm,
that says whatever your needs are, that's what you like whatever your desires and your needs are.
yeah.
But when you're in war, you're not, you're going like, I will go to war for the benefit of others.
Yeah.
I will sacrifice my own needs. I will not come home if necessary, if it means
Yep.
freedom for my family and my loved ones. And I'm willing to sacrifice, I'm willing to do whatever. So um, at some level, that selfishness isn't there. And they're just saying, I'll lay my life down because I'm going to do this for family and all that type of stuff. But the other thing is this entitled thing the entitled thing just goes against every type
Yeah.
of war thing. Like just
Yeah.
that entitled thing, we start feeling sorry for ourselves. This is what I do. I'll just tell you me right now. I don't know what anybody else listening to this, but my any unhealthy coping mechanisms I have, that whatever it is, I want to start, I'm stressed and whatever else, I want to start drifting a certain direction. I begin to feel sorry for myself
Yeah.
and then begin to feel a little bit entitled. I
Yeah.
wouldn't put that words that way, right? But
Yeah.
like whatever, I whatever,
Yeah.
I'm it's been hard, or people have left, or whatever else it is. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Or this isn't about my wife. This is but my
Yeah.
wife is naggy, or
Yeah.
the kids, or you get all this stuff, and we begin to feel like we deserve certain things.
Yeah. It's true.
I deserve certain things. I feel entitled. And the whole gospel is a sacrificial gospel. The whole gospel is pick up your
Yeah.
cross and follow me. And so I think that there's this type of thing as well, where that culture of entitlement, that culture of selfishness actually wars against
It does.
what is needed to fully engage in the fight.
Yeah.
And so that's all there too.
It's so true because in order to have a mission, right? The mission's never about you. And
Yeah,
as
yep,
soon as we get self-focused, as soon as we get into the victim mindset, or however, whatever your coping mechanism of choice, where you're looking at
yeah,
yourself, you are no longer mission based. You're
yeah,
self based.
absolutely.
And therefore, that vision is very, very small. There's very, very low motivation to live a life just for yourself. It's so challenging. Um, you had several things that you wrote about in the book that kind of marked your life, that gave you this deep conviction that your life was built for more. And one of them was reading Dr. Martin Luther King
Yeah,
Jr.'s biography, and Billy
yep,
Graham's book, and like
yep.
these different moments that just gripped you. And from there, that really kind of lit the fire, and you fed that. I mean, you fed that with some heroes in your life, with
Yeah.
with Bill and these other youth pastors and stuff. But I sometimes feel like a lot of our culture, a lot of our men are missing those really unique moments that that spark that I think a lot of times our dad was supposed to create that for us. I see that in the rite of passage, right? And
Yeah.
when a father was supposed to take a son and initiate him into manhood, where he actually he that moment's kind of created for him in a way where he's going, man, I if I want to be like these other men. I know that I was
Yes.
called to take on responsibility, because responsibility leads to freedom, and it leads to honor, and it leads to respect, and only the greatest men get that type of honor, and only the greatest men get to marry, and only the greatest men get to go on hunts and protect the village and family. And
Yeah.
so I think a long time ago, that kind of those moments, those aha moments,
Yeah.
where they watch a hero of theirs do something and they go, that's the man I want to be. Like, you found that through a book.
Yeah.
You found yourself, like, and it's kind of evident when you told Bill, like, no, I want to travel and preach. Well, of course. I mean, in some ways it was selfish. In other ways, you were
Totally.
following the heroes, right? You're
Yeah.
what you had always envisioned yourself. You're going like, no, I want to be like the
Totally.
guys that I've been watching. Um,
Yes.
I think for men right now, and I don't even know this is a question. I think I'm just talking with you. I think men are so lacking that initiation into manhood, which is it's a calling unto responsibility, carrying responsibility. It's a calling unto um purpose, right? Because responsibility gives us purpose in this life. And
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
taking on extra responsibility, we really don't have any other purpose in this life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that um we have to find a way, men have to find a way to initiate themselves at this point into responsibility, into purpose.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on
Well,
that?
here's what I would say. This is why I'm such a deep, deep believer in the local church,
Yeah.
because you have to get around healthy men.
Yeah, it's so true.
You have to get around healthy men. So read books, listen to podcasts, get in community. You
Yeah.
have to get around healthy men. And so
Yeah.
this is something that I found. There's two examples recently for me. One's your dad, another one's there's a leadership consultant, guy named Lyle Wells. And we just had a pastors conference in January, and he's up there. And one of the first things he says to pastors is, he goes, guys, listen, stop feeling sorry for yourself because you have problems. That is why you're a leader. Leaders solve problems.
Yeah.
And it was just this little thing of like, that's right.
Yeah.
I've been complaining about problems, not realizing leaders solve problems.
Gosh.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for, and it's so easy to kind of drift. But the more I'm around healthy men, the more I see what it looks like. The more I'm
Yes.
reminded, your dad the other day, I was talking to him or something like that. And he's just like, I mean, it's been a rough 2 years. And he's
Yeah,
like,
bro.
I was born for this. Like your dad's like, I was born for this. I
I
was
know.
born for hard times. And I'm like, I don't know if I was born for hard times.
Bro.
But I'm saying the more that I'm around
Yeah,
healthy men,
it's true.
the more that I see, oh, come on. I was
It's
born
true.
for this. I was
Yeah.
born for hard times. I
Yeah.
was born to solve problems. I was like, and so I just think, listen, I don't care if you come from a dysfunctional home. I
Yes.
don't care if you didn't have a father around. I do care. I'm sorry, it sounds so heartless. I
No,
could
it's
care
not
less.
that you're
But
saying it's not an excuse. That's what you're
yes,
saying.
good.
It's
Yes,
not an excuse.
go get around men. Go get around
Yeah.
healthy men and listen
Yeah.
to podcasts. And all of a sudden, you see, like, oh my gosh, is that what healthy men think? Is that how they engage the world?
Yeah.
Okay, like,
Yeah.
and there's something in there, and that's why I think, for me, you just have to get around healthy men. There's a guy at our church. I love him dearly, but I mean, you've seen this a lot. Broken
Yeah.
sexually.
Yeah.
I mean, broken sexually.
Yeah.
And do you know that he's getting the counseling, he's getting all that type of stuff, but do you know what he
Yeah.
wasn't, you know what he didn't have? He didn't have healthy men around him. One of the main
Yeah.
things that he's done is get around healthy men. And
Well,
there's just something about it, right? That just goes,
it's what happened. If we continue back in your story, right? You have Jonathan and his armor bearer that step up and they start to slay.
yeah,
And then everybody attaches themselves to his success,
yes, absolutely.
right? He becomes the catalyst for the nation. And again, going back to the way that God created family is I was supposed to
Yes,
be able to attach myself to my dad's success, right? And find success from a young boy
yes,
in his
love
success,
that.
which becomes the launching point for then my life. I'm watching my future self in my dad and participating with him. And so now, yeah, you're absolutely right. The starting point for men. So guys, if you're listening to this, the starting point is to attach yourself to a mission, attach yourself to a group of men, to a brotherhood. I mean, that's why we started BraveCo.
Yes,
That's
yes,
why banding has brothers and fathers like Danny and my dad
yeah,
and Bill and all these other guys that I wouldn't even know that you have.
yep.
That man, on a bad day, it's like, hey Chris, how is it bad over there too? And he goes, oh, we're no, today's sleigh day. Today we're slaying, and you're like, oh yeah. And I had
Is that what
a
we're
call.
doing? I don't think that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I had a call with a friend yesterday, and he was just like, man, this sucks. Life is so hard. And he leads big movement. And that's where I get to step up and go, oh, dude, today is sleigh day. Like no, we were born for this. But he does that for me too. And I just think, guys, okay, really practically, if you're going, where do I start? The beautiful thing of being under or in submission to somebody is you're on a mission, right?
Yes,
You're a part of somebody's mission. And if you've never been linked to somebody else's mission, psychologists say there's two really important relationships that you have to have in order to thrive in life. The first one
mm,
is you connections. The first one is you have to have a one-on-one connection with somebody, a deep one-on-one connection. The next one is you need a connection with a tribe, a group of people where
yes,
you go, this is who I belong to. And if
mm,
you never grew up attaching, having healthy attachments, that's why you feel like you got to fight for yourself. That's why you feel like, man, what is my mission? Man, what was I born for? Because you were never supposed to figure that out on your own. That was supposed to come through the passing down of identity, which again is, I think it's just what we're talking about here. So really grabbing onto who is your group, who's your band of brothers, who's your group of guys that are speaking into you, pushing you forward and helping you run and move forward in life. You know, today is a great day to sit down and write those out. Like, who are those guys? And if you don't have them, well, that's where you have to artificially put one step in front of the other and go, okay, I'm going to go find those guys, because we really love, we like to think that everything's going to happen naturally. It's just like somehow I'm going to find those guys. It doesn't really happen like that. You got to join a small group. You
yeah.
got to join uh, something.
And I think at some level, listen, in an ideal, perfect world, fathers go and find sons, but
Yeah.
sons right now have to go find fathers, and it's just where we are. And I think what you're saying is right. It's this thing of like, this is why getting scriptural, biblical is, it's
Yeah.
the concept of an apostolic father who's
Yeah.
setting mission that we're going to buy into. And then here's the other reality. Not
Yeah.
everybody's wired like me. So I'm
Yeah.
like, let's go. I want to go fill stadiums. I want to go change. I want to mark, like, I want to see I want to see cities
Yeah.
saved. I want to mark all this type of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody's wired like that, but that's okay,
Yeah. It doesn't matter.
because that's whenever, that's when you don't have to be wired like that.
No.
You just have to be connected to a team of people
Yeah.
that are
It's so
moving
true.
together, and that your part that you're playing in this thing. And so, like, do you have to have this massive thing? No, not at all. But you definitely can say, no, I'm part of something. I'm part of something that's headed that direction, and I'm bringing the piece that I bring. I'm bringing. So, yeah,
And
I do love that, man.
you have you have a bunch of steps in your book, but I just want to highlight a couple of them for guys to get started. Man, I want guys ultimately to go back and to get your book and to read it, especially if they're in a spot where they're going, man, I really want to find the call that God has on my life. I loved how Lou Engle said it. He said that I'm gonna butcher it, but you'll probably know it. He says that
Okay.
um, God makes a dream and wraps a
Yeah.
man around it.
Yeah, totally.
Like God has this plan, right? We are created for good works in Christ Jesus, which means that like God already had the work created and then he created you. So there's like, you have a perfect fit, this perfect
Yes.
match to the work, to like something that God specifically created you for. So you should be on the hunt for that. I want to go down and just talk about a couple of your steps really quick. And the first one is to dream it up. Like you have to be able to, you got to have this dream, right? This to be able to, like, again, going back to your story, like you saw Billy Graham and you saw Dr. Martin Luther King and you saw like, oh, I've got a glimpse of, I can kind of see what I feel like I'm called to do. And can you just speak into that a little bit? Like on the baseline level, speak into, how does a guy begin to dream if he doesn't dream? If he's like, man, I just don't, I'm just not there yet.
Well, I think that we you need to go on a journey with the Lord and just
Yeah.
start asking him.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of different ways. Well, let me just back up real quick. Let me just say this real quick.
Yeah.
If you don't have vision, serve somebody's vision. So
Right.
so I'm very big on this concept
Yep.
that Moses was given the mandate for the people of Israel when he
Yep.
was tending the flock of his father-in-law. So the
So good.
picture is
So good.
Moses in Exodus 3, when he has an encounter with the at the burning bush, he
Yep.
was tending somebody else's flock.
Gosh,
So
so
so there,
so
there's something about, and that's when Jesus says, if you can't be faithful with what is another man's, how can you be entrusted with what's yours? So sometimes I would just say, just practically speaking,
yeah.
if you're like, I don't have a dream or a vision, great, go find somebody who does and serve
Yeah.
theirs.
Like
Because in
literally.
yes, in the serving of their vision and dream, the Lord will meet with you and release your own. So that's one.
So
And
great.
I would say this as well. I think the Lord's like, how can I trust you with a dream if you won't even take care of somebody else's? And this is
So
what he
true.
says. If you're not going to take care of his, why would I trust you with your own?
Yep.
So
It's true.
there's that process. But the second thing is just this: you got to go on a journey. This is the incredible part of following Jesus.
Yeah.
Is
It's
he is
true.
he is painting a picture in your life, and it is it is paintbrush stroke by paintbrush stroke that he is painting something. It requires you to pay attention.
Yeah.
So for me, and I talk about in the book, what are the things that move me?
Yeah.
What are the things that I cry over? What are the things
Yeah.
that make me angry? What are the
Yeah.
things that stir me? Those are probably indicators. Those are probably indicators of there's something connected to the call of God on my life. So,
Yeah.
so going through that type of stuff, like what do I cry about? What do I get mad about? What are the things that stir my heart? What are the
Yeah.
stories that I love to hear?
Right.
How am I wired?
Yeah.
Like I'm probably not going to be a worship leader if I can't sing.
Yeah.
Just practically
Totally.
speaking,
Yeah.
the Lord's I have the ability to tell a story. Well, I mean, that's part of what I do.
Yeah.
So there's certain ways that I've been gifted. There's certain things like that, and we just have to pay attention to that. So for me,
I love it.
God is speaking. You
Yeah.
have to pay attention more, and you
Yeah.
just have to lean in and just go, Lord, what is it? What is it that you're doing? And I also think it's why community is so important as well. I think sometimes community can see better than you can. They're like,
Yeah.
you know what you're called to? It's obvious what you're called to. Every time you hear a
So true.
story about foster care, you can't
Yeah.
stop talking about it and you're crying. Maybe there's something about foster care in there. It's things like that.
It's how I got started in counseling people. My dad looked at me when I was 12 or 13. He said, "Oh, son, you have a natural gift. People need what you have. You have real wisdom for people." He told me
Yes.
that. I mean, almost every day, and to where I just
Yeah.
believed him. I was like, wow, I
Yes.
must have this special thing on me. The only thing that was
Yep.
special about it is I literally believed it. So then
Well,
I
but
loved it.
because he did see something in
He
you
did.
that you just have a hard time seeing in yourself, or that you'll downplay, you'll
Yeah, it's true.
diminish. You'll diminish. You're like, that's actually more unique than you think, Jason. Like the ability to have wisdom for people and
Yeah.
insight is more unique. You just kind of diminish it and don't think it's that big a deal. And he's going, no, it's a bigger deal than you think. So
Yeah.
I agree. It's kind of, there's all these things that come in, but I would just say this is the journey. This is the really fun part. I remember the Lord one time, we were trying to raise money for a building. We're going to buy this building. And I'm on a plane, and the Lord says, I'm going to provide the money. And I said, oh, that's so good. How are you going to do that? And he goes, I'm not going to tell you. And there was a sense when he was talking to me that he loved, what I saw him hand me a gift,
Yeah.
but he didn't unwrap it because
Yeah.
he loved the discovery process I was about to go through in unwrap. He told me what the gift was,
Yeah.
but he really wanted to see me unwrap it. And
Gosh.
so there's something about the Lord that's like, dude, he loves this journey. He
Yeah.
loves seeing you discover what you're called to. He loves you. He doesn't just give you a gift that's not wrapped. He gives you a wrapped
Yeah.
gift. He's like, my favorite part is watching you
Yeah.
unwrap this gift. And so I just think let's go on that journey. Let's go unwrap this
Yeah.
thing called the call of God in our life. And it's going to take some time. We're going to have to figure it out. We're going to do all that type of stuff. But the whole time, God is just like, oh, I love this. He's like, you got a call on your life. I
I
want to know
think
all about it. He goes, you're going to unwrap it. And that's going to be my favorite part.
I think so many people, they look at you or they look at my dad, guys like Bill, and there's a lot of envy there, not even bad envy, good envy, because it in their mind, they think that you have arrived in your journey and you're somewhere out like at this resting point. And but that's true, right? That's real. Like they think that somehow you arrived at this
Yeah.
point, in this resting point, and now you kind of just do whatever, right? Like my dad kind of like his whole life is just set and made, and he just lives in the God's presence all the time, and floats through his shop. And the most incredibly complicated thing about God is how much he likes the journey. It's
Oh,
really
yes.
crazy. And I think there's a point in my life where I realized there is no real destination.
Yeah.
Like not while we're alive. I'm going to be on this journey until literally until I die. It just
Yeah.
doesn't stop, because verses like James 1, consider it pure joy when you encounter various trials, for the
Yeah.
testing of your faith, right? Produces perseverance. When
Yeah.
perseverance runs its course, it will lack nothing. Like that verse is always revolving in our lives.
Yes.
And I know it is in yours
Yes.
too. I mean, that in my life, that verse,
Yes.
that consider it pure joy when you encounter various trials, the trials have never stopped in my life. They just
Yeah.
haven't, in one way
Yeah.
or another. And we really are going from this glory to glory. And so part of it to me is, for men, is, well, I can illustrate it like this. When I fought fire for a couple of years, I was leading a fire crew, and I was in really good shape at that point. And I remember hiring this new guy who liked to party on the weekends. And he would come to work like Monday and hike really hard, and he would throw up, especially on the hard days. And I remember he was in the back of the line, so I went back and I was hiking with him. He was way far behind, and he looked at me and he said, "Man, when is the hiking? When does it not hurt?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "When does this stop hurting?" And I said, "Oh, it doesn't ever stop hurting." And he said, "And this never stops hurting?" And I said, "No, the interesting thing is, and that was true for me. It, I got faster and I recovered quicker and I got stronger, but that just meant that I carried more and I went further
Yes.
and I went longer.
Yep.
and I went faster. And I just reassured him, like, you'll learn to love the hurting. You you'll learn to embrace it because you know what it's doing inside of you, right? It's creating this
Yes.
perseverance. And
Uh,
to me, there's so much hidden inside of the mystery of the process that
yes.
you just
Yes.
can't get to your calling. And I think this is why I bring this up is you
Yes.
cannot, you can't get to your calling. You can't even touch your calling unless you are willing to work through the pain, in which is your second point, and to count the cost. You just
Yeah.
can't.
Let me say this real quick too, because I love what you're talking about, the journey and the process. I find a lot of people get discouraged because it feels like they're going around the same mountain. So they felt like I already dealt with this. And now 3 years later, I'm dealing with it again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's not the same mountain. It's almost
Mhm.
like an onion. No, that's a
Yeah,
deeper level. And
it
so
is.
even in this journey, it's interesting. God does something here, but then,
Yeah.
and that was enough for that moment. But
Yeah.
3, 4 years later, all of a sudden you're like, why am I going through the same thing again? I'm like, you're not going through the same thing again. This is an even deeper layer
Yeah.
that God is doing. And I don't know if that ever ends. It's just
It
like,
doesn't.
and he just continues to go that journey of like, oh, like that layer 4 years ago, that was what was required then. I want to go deeper now. And then I want to go and it's I just love what you're talking about. And this is why, guys, for everybody listening to this thing, it takes, and I talk about this in the book, it takes so much courage
It does.
to follow the
Yeah.
Lord and grow. It takes so much courage.
You're
And
just
this is
back to,
what
you can't do it on your own.
no, and you are going to be in over your head the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Following Jesus means he's constantly taking you off the map into uncharted territory, in over your head. It's just what it is. I think you just have to finally come and accept that fact that I will never be on cruise control, ever. Never in my life will I set it and forget it. Like it's just not how this thing works.
Yeah.
And you do learn. I think you have better clarity around
Yeah.
it. So like for you, it's not just that like, well, it's hard. I have clarity around the hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know how to kind of position my life a little bit better around the hard. And I'm not drinking on the weekends. So I'm
Right.
not bringing
Yeah.
I'm not bringing unneeded baggage. You know what
No.
I'm saying? Like, oh, part of why it's hard is because you're drinking on the weekends.
Yeah.
But I'm able to kind of, but it's always going to be hard. It's always going to
There's
take courage.
there's this cool transition when there becomes purpose in the pain, right? There's such a cool transition when you're no longer afraid of the pain, or you're no longer afraid of the journey, but you get to this sweet spot. And I know that we'll get beyond that sweet spot into another scary spot, but where you get into a sweet spot in your life with God, where you can really enjoy the process and the journey. I want to close in a second, but the evidence to me that life doesn't, that our calling in God doesn't reach this, like, this destination, is, to me, is like Psalms 23, this perfect destination. Psalms 23 is this beautiful picture of God taking a really wore out, broken down person, right? And laying him down in the green pasture and restoring his soul, doing this perfect work of restoration. And you would think that if God took somebody that was just kind of wore out and restored him, that he would release him, like my Bible, I don't know, like my Bible school mind wants to go like, oh, he's going to release him into this perfect pasture of peace, and he's going to run with the Holy Spirit for the rest of his life,
You're so
and
adorable.
be married to Jesus, and all these cool things. But when you go back and read it, you see this guy who gets restored. And then he
Yeah.
says, yea, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil because God's
Yes.
with me. And that is what God's doing in each one of our lives, right? He's restoring Like this is this is his one of his greatest hopes for our life is to take the place that we are so weary and broken and afraid, to
Mm,
restore that, and then to send you back into the battle
yeah,
because you're a troop, you're a warrior, right? So
that's what you were born for.
you were born for it. And so God's secret plan for your life is to send you back into the battle through your red carpet is the valley of the shadow of death,
Yeah, totally. So good.
where you get put in front of your enemies in your that the greatest intimidation to your enemy is that you're staring at him while eating and you're hungry.
Totally. Totally. Uh, yeah.
That's it.
I
I mean, that is where God wants to take us.
Amen. Amen. I agree. And that's why podcasts like this and all that type of stuff and what you're doing with BraveCo, and it's why we easily forget that. It's
It's yes.
amazing how quickly we forget some of these things.
I forget it weekly. If it wasn't
Yes.
for this type of stuff, I would once again find myself on the feel sorry train. And
Yeah,
what am I
totally.
doing in life?
Yeah. I love it. So good.
Banning, would you pray for us?
Absolutely. Father, so grateful for everybody listening to this podcast. God, my heart's just so stirred. You know, I don't know all their stories, but you do. You see exactly where they're at.
Yep.
And I just see freedom coming. But I just really believe that the word of the Lord over some men listening right now is freedom, but freedom to run. And that so much of the sin that so easily entangles us, it just stops us from fully running. And I just saw freedom to
Mm.
run, and not freedom from the fight, freedom to run. And so, Lord,
Yep.
we just speak freedom. We're just so grateful for men that are wanting to grow and be warriors and fight. I just pray, just breathe fresh life, Lord. Just be winds of refreshing that blow in the lives of men, and just so grateful for Jason and all that's going on here, Lord. We just really pray that you would ignite a movement around the world. And we love you, Jesus. Amen.
Manning, you're the man. Thank you so much, bro.
So good being with you.
Appreciate you. Have a great week. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.